Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. It is so great to be with you all tonight and to talk a little bit about what we've been talking about on the blog for the past 4 weeks, and that is cortisol. So let me kind of orient you, and I'll show you around the blog to make sure we're all on the same page. Because over the past 4 weeks, I have kind of dripped to you a little bit of content each week about the importance of cortisol. And the reason why I chose to focus on cortisol right now at this particular time is because right now, this is a pretty stressful time for women in particular, right? So, this is the time that either one, we've got kids going back to school. So, back to school time is always busy. We're always trying to get ready to get kids back in school. And so, we have the additional pressures of our daily jobs already. We have the pressures of all the different things kind of closing out for summer and making sure you kind of gotten ready for the school year. And then school has to start, and you've got to get the kiddos back on schedule and ready to get back into the thick of things in school. And all of this is happening while you still have all the other same responsibilities you had when summer was going on. So I really felt like August was a good time to sort of talk about the stresses that we put on ourselves. And then as we go into September, really take some time to actually say, well, what can we actually do to start to minimize stress in our lives? So a lot of the stress that we experience is often self-inflicted. And so you heard me talk about that over the several weeks on the blog, because a lot of things we internalize as being stressful or we allow to overwhelm us, when in fact, it's not really something that is designed to cause us stress. And we have to start to figure out ways of how we can mitigate what we experience as it relates to stress if we really want to see long-term impact on our health. Because if you remember, when we talked on the blog, we talked about acute stress versus chronic stress. And in the case of acute stress, that's short term. So those are things that you might experience, like if you are, in a car accident or something happens to you, in an acute situation like that, and that's acute stress because you were in an accident and there's going to be a period of time where you have to respond to the accident. Maybe you need care. All of those things are happening short term, happening acutely. So that's acute stress. Maybe you're getting ready to deliver a presentation. Maybe you're on camera like I am tonight, and you are a little nervous about your presentation. And so that's acute stress, right? Because you're being put into an environment where you have to be on camera, and maybe that might make you a little nervous. So those are situations of acute stress. So it becomes chronic, though, when we experience that same thing on a daily basis, when we experience something that overwhelms us and threatens to mishandle or mismanage our homeostasis. So we feel off balance. We feel out of alignment because something is causing us to feel overwhelmed. And if that happens on a daily basis, then you're experiencing chronic stress. So let me kind of walk you back through, because I got a few questions that were sent in from people who were not able to attend. And so I thought what I would do is just sort of recap what we talked about on the blog over the past several weeks. And then I will pull in some of the questions as I talk about what we covered over the past few weeks, and I will address those questions along the way. So I felt like that was probably the better way to manage the questions tonight, to make sure that everyone is on the same page. Because some of you maybe only came in on the last blog, so maybe you didn't catch the whole series, and you're not exactly sure what to ask about cortisol because maybe you only saw one post. So I want to make sure that you are following the post in a sequence. So I'm going to show you that sequence, and then I'll address some of the questions that I know have already come up as a result of reviewing some of the content I shared over the past few weeks. All right, so let me share my screen and we will dive right in. All right, so what you are looking at right now is just the main blog page. And I'm going to cut my camera off because I have lost where my Zoom is. So since I don't know where my Zoom is, I don't know where to look, which kind of makes it a little difficult to be on camera, right? So let me just do that. And there we go. All right. So we will come back to me after I kind of, I don't want to distract you with what's going on what I'm looking at. I want you to just focus on what I'm showing you on the blog. All right, so this is the main blog page. So if you go over here to CoreyCooper.com, that will bring you to the home page. And then of course, if you click on read the blog, that'll take you to the main blog page. So when you look at the main blog page right now, the featured post, that's the most recent post that's been posted to the blog, is the last post in the series of the cortisol series. So if you scroll down here, you will see the previous posts. And so I'll scroll down to the very first one. So the first one is about cortisol, what you need to know to improve your health. Is cortisol the reason you're not losing weight? That was week 2. Week 3, 5 tips to reset your cortisol levels. And then finally, here we are, what to eat to get rid of belly fat. So those are the 4 posts that are included in the cortisol series. So let's go down here and start with post 1. So I can highlight a few things for you that I think are important that I really want you to understand. So this is where it kind of starts, right? So this is what you need to know, the basics about cortisol and how it might be impacting your health. So when we think about the basis of cortisol, this is what I talked about a little bit as it relates to acute stress and chronic stress. And so the reason why we have a problem with cortisol levels, particularly us women, is because we feel stress on a daily basis. There is something that we are doing on a repeated daily basis that is in some way causing us stress. And you see, I called this out here in this particular box that women report a higher level of stress than men. And a lot of it is related to those responsibilities that I kind of alluded to when I started this call, having to make sure all the kids are ready for school or whatever it is that the family, caring for the family, and then also still working, having a full-time job, and then maintaining the other aspects of the household. So even though I know women are the only people who have some of these responsibilities, I just want to call that out because, my audience is predominantly women. So it doesn't mean that there's no men here, but because my audience is predominantly women, I want to call this out because it's extremely important that we start to recognize what might be causing us stress and recognizing that we're not alone. Because sometimes you can feel like, why does everyone else feel this overwhelmed? Does everyone else feel this stressed out about all the things that they have to do? Or is it just me? So no, it is not just you. Women of all types report a higher level of stress than men related to those compounding responsibilities of working, caring for the family, and maintaining the household. So I definitely want to call that out here. So here is the first post. So we're talking about just understanding the amount of stress that we're experiencing on a daily basis. And then I break down acute versus chronic stress. So this post highlight for you when cortisol is good to have, when cortisol is not a bad thing. It's a protective mechanism for our body. And so I highlight here for you when cortisol is good and when cortisol is bad. And so that's what we're talking about when I talk about the fact that we only need cortisol at certain times of the day. So we need cortisol at the right time, just not all the time. So this is where you can find this information here on the first post in the blog series. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the next post. And don't worry, I'm coming back to camera soon. I want to see all your faces. So I'm coming back to camera soon, but I want to walk you through where you can get all your information for the blog. All right, so this is post number 1. And then you can head over to post number 2. Is cortisol the reason you're not losing weight? So a lot of times what happens is when women come to me to talk about they're like, I need to lose weight. And the emphasis is always on, I need to lose weight, but from a place of, what should I or shouldn't I eat? And I often always start with, well, let me get an idea of what's happening in your day. Help me to understand what an average day looks like for you. Because a lot of the reasons why we're not losing weight is not necessarily because of the food we're putting on our plate. It's because of the external and internal stress that we're experiencing as a result of all the different things going on in our life. And because of that, chronic stress, which we learned about in that first post, is contributing to those elevated levels of cortisol. Okay, so this post walks you through how cortisol contributes to weight gain and walks you through this idea of, often as women, because we're so used to caring for everybody, we're used to going to work, we're used to coming home and cooking dinner, we're used to caring for the kids, getting the kids to bed, doing all the things. And so because we do all those things, we feel like we're supposed to be tired. So like we feel like, well, I mean, I should be tired. Look at all the things I did today. And so we often make excuses for, or we miss the cues that our body is trying to tell us about our health because we're specifically, because we're assuming that, hey, I'm just supposed to be tired because of all the things that I do during the day. And so this is kind of what I walk you through in this post, is understanding that those signals that your body is giving you are signs of chronic stress. And when we're in a position of being chronically stressed, we tend to eat more. Okay. So we're eating at times that we're not actually hungry. That's where that emotional eating comes in. And I have this great, there's a post I definitely wanted to do about emotional eating, because I get so many questions about that. It's like, how do I stop emotional eating? And so I definitely want to make sure that you all have access to that. So, that's what this post is about. So we talk about the fact that we talk about emotional eating, we talk about the hormones that are elevated. So aside from cortisol being elevated, you have ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone, and it's increased in the presence of chronic stress. And when it's increased in the presence of chronic stress, you're eating and you're not actually hungry. Excuse me. So you're not able to regulate the amount of food you consume because you've got these hormones telling you you're hungry when in fact you're actually not. And so that's also an issue when we talk about elevated cortisol. And the big thing that that can kind of help you know whether or not you are actually having elevated cortisol levels is where your fat gets distributed. So cortisol likes to hang around the belly. So whenever you have elevated cortisol and you're struggling with weight gain, if you have a lot of belly fat, that's kind of a signal to you to think about, oh, maybe I'm dealing with some additional stress that is preventing me from losing weight, because your body likes to store fat around the waist area because it's a way of protecting you. That's where it needs to protect your internal organs. And so it's going to send fat to that area to protect you because it thinks you're stressed. And as we learned in that first post, your body can't tell the difference between real stress versus perceived stress. And so it's going to hold that fat around the belly to protect you. And so that is another cue that you might need to be looking at your stress level, things that you're doing that may be contributing to keeping your stress elevated, that's preventing you from losing weight. So that is the second post in the series. So if we go to the next one, and we have two more left, and then I'll hop back and kind of answer some of the questions that I got in the beginning and then I got some via email and some questions I got right before the call. So the next blog post after that, so again, we've walked through the series. This is post 3, 5 tips to reset your cortisol levels. So when you're on the blog for this week, it's showing you ways in which you can help to improve your cortisol. I mean, it would not be fair of me to only talk to you about having elevated cortisol and then not telling you what to do about it. So that's what this blog post here is about for week 3, is what tips can I share that can help you to start thinking about ways to lower your cortisol. All right, so the first one is go to bed. And I'm just going to quickly run through the 5. Go to bed, regular checkups, be active, stay hydrated, and of course, manage your stress. And so I of course, go back and read through these, but I wanted to highlight those 5 things for you because I haven't even talked about food yet. And you know that from the last blog post where I was like, hey, we haven't talked about food yet. Let me tell you what to eat. Because that is not always the most important thing. Because when you focus only on the food, you will miss the other things that are contributing to why you're gaining weight, why you're struggling, with fatigue, why you're struggling with feeling like you're overwhelmed all the time. It's these other things that we need to do before we even start to talk about food. So that's what this post is here. So post 3 in the series, five tips to reset your cortisol. So let me scroll back down to the bottom here, and we'll cover the last one where I actually finally get to talking about food. So this, of course, is the most recent post where we go over the different foods on how to, what foods to eat that can help you target specifically belly fat. And I walk you through probiotics and fermented foods. So that's where that prioritizing gut health comes in, because if you remember when we talked about on the blog, I told you that in the presence of elevated cortisol, of stress, your body is not going to, for acute stress. Chronic stress is when we talk about emotional eating, but for acute stress, your body deprioritizes digestion. So when you initially start to experience stress, your body's going to just say, hey, I don't have time to eat right now. I have to deal with whatever stressful situation is happening. But as that continues over time, once that chronic stress sets in, then that's when we transition over to elevated cortisol along with elevated ghrelin, which is going to increase your hunger. But if it's an acute stressful environment, your body's not thinking about, like that time where I gave the example of, hey, I'm here. It's a perfect example. So earlier in the call today, I said, you don't want to, it might be like I'm jumping on the call, getting on video, talking to you all tonight. So maybe that makes me nervous. And so I'm not going to want to eat right before I do a presentation on video because it's a period of acute stress because I'm slightly stressed because I know I'm going to have to get on camera and talk and do all the things. So I'm not going to be thinking about eating. And I'm sure you all can relate to that. Like that moment right before you do a presentation, you're not thinking about food. That's an acute stress. All right, so fermented food. So that means we got to protect our gut because our gut health has been hindered as a result of that chronic stress. Antioxidants, so reducing inflammation in our bodies. Stress sets up because of all those hormones that are released in a stressful environment. That's causing inflammation. And so you have to reduce that stress or reduce that inflammation with using antioxidant rich food. So vitamin C's, blueberries, foods that are, when you think about foods that are really bright in color, those foods have antioxidant properties. Fiber. So fiber also is going to help your digestion. So it's not only will it help you feel full, because remember, you're in that chronic stress, you are looking for hunger all the time. You're looking for food all the time because of that hunger hormone. So you can suppress that with the fiber. And then, of course, I go into fats because that can offer the same thing. And it can also balance all these hormones that are present in stress. So the ghrelin, the cortisol, all these different hormones that tend to rise when you're in periods of stress. You can use healthy fats to help calm those levels and keep your hormones in balance. And then, of course, I talk about water because water is really important for everything. So that's the series. So again, I'm going to go right back here so you can make sure you know where to find everything. So of course, the most recent post is going to be the main post on the page, and that'll be the featured post at the top. And then if you scroll down, you can go through the entire series to kind of catch you back up on what we've been talking about. All right. So let me stop sharing and come back to the screen so that I can see smiling faces. All right, so let me answer some questions that I got and go over some of the different topics that kind of came up from the series in the blog post, and then we will close out for the evening. So what I want to kind of, I guess I'll do the questions based upon like categories. So there was a question, or there was a category of questions around like snacking. So when you talk about foods to eat, there were kind of a couple of questions that sort of fell under the umbrella of, well, I feel like I can't stop eating. So even when I sit down for a meal, I think I have like a well-balanced meal, I still can't stop eating. So there's this constant wanting to eat after I've finished a meal. And then there's also the idea of, well, I'm snacking in between meals because the meal that I had just wasn't filling. And so I'm eating like every 2 hours because I'm just so distracted and I'm so overwhelmed and I don't really want to do what I'm supposed to do. So instead of doing those things, I'm just going to buffer with food. And so that's occurring for a couple of things. So you heard me already talk about the elevation in cortisol over time. Chronic stress contributes to what we would call emotional eating. So that's part of it. And so the other part of it is this idea that when we are in a stressful environment, of course, the thing that we are going to naturally want to do as a protective mechanism is to not do the thing that stresses us out. So if you are looking at your email inbox at work and you've got the 700 emails in there, you're like, I don't want to deal with that. I'm overwhelmed. It's too many things that I have to do. And so instead of going through my email and trying to check some of the stuff off the list, I'm just going to walk over and to, if I'm go to the break room and get a snack. I heard we have donuts today, so let me go to the break room and get a snack. Or maybe I'll just go dig in my lunchbox and see what I brought that I could snack on. And so it's not so much even emotional eating. It's this idea of our bodies trying to say, hey, this is stressing you. Let's remove ourselves from that environment. And so in order to kind of feel like it's protecting you, you're going and having food instead of doing the thing that you need to do. So in some ways that's emotional eating, but it also in other ways, it's just this kind of idea of like buffering with food, like going to food to food to sort of comfort you and sort of ease the stress that you're feeling at that moment. And so part of that is not so much feeling like, um, I don't want you to feel like you're like, well, I'm on a diet, I'm not supposed to be snacking right now, because that mindset around diet and restriction is also going to kind of put you on the defense, and it's going to make you want the snack even more because you're on the defensive about feeling some type of way about being restricted. So all of those things are contributing to you overeating. All of those things are contributing to still creating and maintaining a stressful environment for you. So those are the times where we really have to sort of coach ourselves. And this is where I talk a lot about that transition from your sympathetic nervous system to your parasympathetic nervous system. And we have to kind of calm ourselves down in some way. So the fastest way to do that is breath. So the fastest way to switch on your parasympathetic nervous system is to just pause, take a minute, take a couple of deep breaths, and ask yourself the question, is this really about food? Like, do I really need to go to the break room right now? Or do I just need to sit here and try to work through at least 2 emails? Maybe I can get through 3 emails. So you really have to kind of stop and talk to yourself and sort of, help your body to calm down and realize that you're not really in a stressful environment, that you're not really in a place of danger where you should feel stressed, that you have this perceived stress, and you've got to find a way to shift your body to understand, look, I need you to calm down. It's not that serious. We're just talking about emails here. Okay. And so in some ways that might be journaling. So sometimes when I know I have a lot on my to-do list and I feel overwhelmed by that, and I'm sitting in front of the 700 emails, I just pull out my planner and I start to write things down. Like, I just start to write down every single thing that I have to do, because that is getting it out of my head. So I'm not internalizing it, and I'm putting it on paper. I talked about that in one of the emails I send you guys on Sunday, is this idea of really of identifying ways to help you refocus some of the energy that you're putting into things that stress you into things that calm you. So it's not, so when I say journal, don't think, oh, I need to write a novel in the middle of the day. No, just get stuff out of your head and get it onto paper. So first thing in this environment of stress is, how can you transition your body to a place of where it feels like it can calm down? So that's number one. And the other thing that I think people um, that I think is helpful to think about as it relates to snacking is that it's not like snacking is necessarily a bad thing. So we label snacking as, oh, it's terrible, I shouldn't snack. But depending on, there's different body types, there's different ways that people process food. And so it's important for you to know that about yourself, and to know whether or not you are a person who actually does need snacks throughout the day, or maybe you're a person that doesn't. And if you know that about yourself, you don't have to feel bad about snacking if you recognize that snacking just helps you to keep your blood sugar stable throughout the day, and it helps you to actually eat less over time. So that was what I would say about snacking. I think the other thing that kind of came up, like the category of questions that came up, was around this idea of feeling like you don't have time to do any of the things. So you're in this place, you're stressed out because you don't have time. So you've got all these things to do, and I'm giving you these suggestions of how to incorporate things into your daily life. But if you're already in a position of feeling overwhelmed and like you don't have time, how do you think, how are you going to change your thought to be in a position of, oh, well, I do have time to do this, or I do have time to pull out my planner and write some things down, or I do have time to sit here, take a couple of breaths, meditate quietly. I do have time to take a quick walk around, to walk around the office, or walk outside the office. So these are all things that I really need you. This is kind of like you have to really be honest with yourself, right? You have to kind of maybe, give yourself some tough love here and just really stop to think, do you really, are you so busy? Are you so stressed out that you cannot stand up and walk away from your desk or walk away from the computer for 1 minute? You cannot stand up and step away, pause, take a breath for 2 minutes. Because we assume that we have to do so many things to actually achieve this this state of low stress, that we have to journal, we have to meditate, we have to have a morning routine, we have to have an evening routine, we have to do this. So we start to stress ourselves out thinking about all the things that we're supposed to do to make us feel not stressed. And when in actuality, you don't have to do any of those things, but you do have to identify a way to actually calm your body, calm your nervous system to be able to deal with the things that do stress you out. And maybe that's just a minute. I think that we underestimate the power of pausing or just doing something that helps to shift us, that takes us a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. We underestimate the power of that because we don't do it enough. But if you took 3 minutes every day and did that consistently for weeks, for months on end, you would see a dramatic change in your focus, in your ability to respond to stress, in your productivity. All of these things that we think that we just don't have time to do, it's because we're making the list longer than it needs to be. My schedule is different from yours, and your schedule is going to be different from the person that sits next to you at work, the person, your friend, your best friend that you talk to on the phone every night. Everybody has a different schedule, and so we have to do the things that will work for us and stop trying to model our day after someone else. So what works for me may not work for you, but there are aspects that you can take from the different practices that I may talk about, that you may read about, that you may see that I post about on the blog. You can take certain aspects of that and say, well, what can I incorporate? What can I do? Instead of looking at it from a place of I can't do that, but what can I do? So start to reframe the question and well, maybe I can take a minute to just get up and walk around my desk. Or maybe I can take a minute to just step outside and get some fresh air. Start to think of little things that you can do on a daily basis, because if you don't identify something that you can practice consistently, you will experience the result of chronic stress, which is chronic disease. Chronic stress leads to chronic disease. When we talk about diabetes, cardiovascular disease, so hypertension, high cholesterol, all of those things, chronic, weight gain over time, so leading to obesity, all of those things are a result of our inability to take action when we know that we should have, because we knew we were stressed out. We knew we weren't doing the things to take care of ourselves. And so we didn't take action. So that is what I want you to think about as you watch. I'll post this recording. You can watch the recording later. You can feel free to, if there's some more additional questions, I'm happy to stay on for another minute or, to answer any additional questions. But those were kind of the main themes of what I got via email, was this idea of, I don't have time to do any of the things you're telling me to do. And yes, I understand cortisol makes me eat, but I eat all the time and I can't seem to stop. So go back, watch the recording, grab onto one thing, go back and read the blog series again. Grab onto something and that you think is going to be helpful to you, that you can start implementing today. And then one of the things I will share with you on the blog is, I want to continue kind of having this conversation. I really want to talk to you all about ways to lower stress, because that is what's actually, leading to disease and leading to all the things that we're struggling with. And so I want to spend some time talking about, I want to open up some live coaching for, more calls like this. I have supplement recommendations that I want to share with you all. So I really want you to start paying attention and just incorporating one thing at a time. So I thank y'all so much for spending a few minutes with me tonight. I know it's always hard to jump on these calls late at night, but I am so grateful for you. And we will talk again soon. Bye for now.